Hi everyone, and welcome to another comics loving edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I am delighted to be peering into the creative life of Leroy Brown. Leroy, thank you for jumping in, joining, and taking a few minutes to talk with me.
Well, thank you so much, Jason, for reaching out. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Absolutely. I'm glad you said yes and glad to share about the work that you're doing in the world of ice cubes. So I'm sure we'll make our way around to talking about that and how it came to be, but curious about what connected you to comics and visual storytelling to begin with.
Yeah, well, you were kind enough to alert me in your email that you were going to ask that question. So I,
Yes, I
I
do know.
came a little bit prepared. I thought about it for a minute, and actually, my route is a little bit different than most, I would say. Although I did, of course, love comics as a kid. I really mostly loved cartoons, TV cartoons. Saturday morning cartoons was my thing. I just absolutely was entranced by early morning Saturday morning cartoons. But when I turned 10, my family moved to Europe. We moved
Mhm.
to France. And in France, they did not have Saturday morning cartoons.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was heartbroken, of course. And to add insult to injury, actually in France at the time, I don't know if they still do it, but Saturday morning they had school. So you had to go to school on Saturday morning for a half a day, which was like just the worst because, my whole Saturdays became this real sort of sad affair rather than being the happy, the happy Saturdays that used to be in my childhood. So, and I realized that what happened is that because I lost my cartoons, my access to my cartoons, what they did have in France, though, was comic books. They had, uh, I'm sure you know of the Franco-Belgian School of Comics. It's
Hmm.
fairly well-known style of comics that was very popular in those days. And so they had, their own local comics that were really good. And so I really kind of went towards that as an escape. And I really ended up finding out that a lot of those comic artists, especially the Franco-Belgian school, a lot of them were very inspired by cartoons from America.
Hmm. Hmm.
And some of them actually even came to America and studied in America. And they were all, of course, influenced by Disney and all that kind of stuff. And so it was kind of an odd way to loop the loop, to kind of
Yeah.
go around in a backdoor kind of way. And but I got involved with comics that way, and it's sort of through the European school. And I got in touch, with some of those creators. As a matter of fact, one of them became my de facto mentor. And I kept writing at age 14, I keep writing these letters to the editors, and eventually they handed one of the letters over to this artist that I really adored because his work was really great. And he answered me. And so he kind of became my de facto mentor and sort of taught me a bunch of stuff about, how to draw comics, which was, opened my eyes to this whole universe of, wow, not only do I love it, but now I'm finding out how to actually make them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I also would come back to the States for Christmas to visit the family and stuff. And I had an aunt who kind of, I guess, kind of knew that I liked comics, and she gave me this book that I prepared against to get to show you,
Yes.
which basically changed my life, which was
Ah, nice.
The Art of Animation by Preston Blair. Once and then once I got this book, it was like, oh my goodness, it showed me that not only did all the dreams of my childhood uh, were they real, but I could actually participate by learning how to do it in reading that book. So that book became my go-to, and that's really how I learned was through looking at that book. And I even tried to build my own little animation stand at home with a piece of glass on two bricks
Hmm.
and a light bulb behind it, and with like onion skin paper, I would trace the drawings. And So my background was I really loved animation and cartoons, and and eventually that kind of became my career in a way. So
hmm
if I talk
hmm
about that, we can talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what has that been like to sort of creating cartoons, animation, and create across media?
Well, eventually I made my way to art school, and in art school I realized that I was doing comics back then, underground comics at the time, of course,
Mm,
'cause,
mm, mm,
but and in France there was sort of like this underground comics movement that was just starting. It was later than the one in America. America was more the 60s and 70s. France was later. In the 80s it really hit. There was this big underground comics movement in France. So I got involved in that. And but I came to art school in the States. And so I was doing comics. But then I realized that there was this whole new field of computers. And I thought,
mhm.
wow, what a great combination, art and computers. And it sort of brought everything together: art, computers, animation, television, my early love for TV cartoons. And that became my career. So I kind of shifted away from just drawing, and I started to learn how to do art on computers, which at the time was, really the beginning of that. And so I became a computer graphics artist, and I ended up working in television. I ended up working at MTV in the 90s and other television networks, and doing graphics and animation. And so that was where my career, pivoted at that point.
Yeah, yeah. So, how did Ice Cubes come to be?
So Ice Cubes came later. Obviously, I had my
hmm
career in television, and I always wanted to get back to my cartoons and my comics. I mean, and I would do every now and again. I would draw a comic, but I had my first kid, and and I was at home, stay-at-home dad a lot of times because I was a freelancer mostly. So I had my wife worked and I worked from home, so I was a stay-at-home dad. So I
hmm
spent a lot of time with my kid, and I thought, I really would like to sort of reconnect with my, comics, my love for comics. And so I came up with this idea, and of trying to apply, you know, to a newspaper syndicate,
hmm
with a comics idea, comic strip idea. And so, I started reading comic strips in the newspapers a lot. And back then things were already starting to change for newspapers. And but I decided to go ahead anyway. And I came up with this idea for a newspaper style comic strip called Ice Cubes, which featured, these characters in the Arctic Circle up in Alaska. And and it was funny animal kind of comic, very sort of traditional. Um, and it was in a newspaper, traditional newspaper pen and ink kind of style. And I really
hmm
liked that because it was different from what I was doing for work, which was very involved with computers. And this was like back to, actually drawing on paper and, having to ink the comics and everything, which is something that I really wanted to do because that's how I learned as a kid. So
hmm
I tried it out. Obviously, I submitted to the syndicates and got swiftly rejected. And at that point, I was like, "Wow, what am I going to do now?" I was crushed, right?
hmm hmm
And at the time, web comics were just starting to happen. It was in the mid 2000s, 2010s, and I
hmm
was like,
hmm
"Wow, maybe I should try this out." So I tried web comics and tried to sort of cobble together a website that kind of worked a little bit. And so that's what it became. It became a web comic. Yeah.
Love it, love it. Yeah, continuing on and continuing on. I love the story, the perseverance. Um, so, as you look back across television, comics, are there particular experiences that sort of bubble to the surface that you would point people to?
Well, I published a couple of books because I think with the publishing on the web was, once removed, I felt in a way
Mm-hmm.
from the art, which, I really enjoyed doing the art in a tactile sense, using the old tools, the pen, the nibs, the brush, the ink, working
Mm-hmm.
on paper. I really like that. The tactile aspect of it is something that I really like. And so the web was great to reach people, but it was missing that feeling. And I also love comic books from when I was a kid. So I started publishing books, and I have a couple of them here. But um, I published my first book in sort of a landscape format,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it did pretty well. I did a Kickstarter. It did pretty well, and so then when I got enough new comics, I published a new one, but I did it more in a comic book format
Love it. Yeah.
because this was very expensive to
Oh,
get
okay.
printed, um, and this was less expensive, and also it was easier to put into store racks.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I had a couple of stores locally that really loved the comic and supported the comic, and they put it in the stores, and that was a big deal for me. Seeing my comic book in stores was wow. I was like, I kept showing my wife, look, come see. We would go to a comic book store and I say, look, here's Ice Cubes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I guess after that, finding it in the finding Ice Cubes in the old racks,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and going through it and under Ice Cubes. I think, look, it's in the old racks. And then I recently found a copy of an Ice Cubes book at Half Price Books. I don't know if you
Nice.
guys have Half Price Books up where you guys but where we are, there's a store called Half Price Books. It's very
Mm-hmm.
popular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I found a copy of my book that someone had obviously, gave back to the store. So it was kind of funny. And so publishing is obviously, a lot of fun, and that's a great way to
Mm-hmm.
reach people and to, give something, tactile and tangible to people that they can hold in their hands. So I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, I appreciate the work. And what currently has your creative focus?
Well, so I recently revamped the website, so I'm working on that, try to get it to work better for smartphones, obviously, because that's where most people, watch the comic now. Obviously, it's kind of an interesting thing, which has made me have to shift away from doing, you know, horizontal strips, which was the way I was doing them for, newspapers,
Mm-hmm.
to now having to do them more vertically. So I'm
Oh, nice.
actually
Yeah.
starting to do it makes me it gives me more work. So I'm starting to do more full page comics now.
Mm-hmm.
So this fits a dual purpose, which is it works better on a smartphone and it works better in a comic book format once I publish the book. So, and right now I'm working on a new story arc, which is a little bit more complicated than my original style, which is quite involved. You can see there's a lot of ink on this page.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
That is beautiful.
oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And
Uh-huh.
it's yeah, it's giving me a little bit of trouble and kind of a little bit daunting. But so it's a story arc where one of the characters in the comic strip is decided to make a movie with
Mm-hmm.
his cell phone. So he's going around, and so in the movie, the characters, which are very funny animal, simplistic, cartoony kind of style, transform into this realistic, dark style. So that's
Yeah.
what I'm working on right now. So the story arc, if you go to the website, it's got this more involved drawing style, which is a challenge, which is fun.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I'm working on the third book. So the third book, fingers crossed, should come out, fairly soon. Maybe in a month or 6 weeks, I hope.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank
You're a
you.
busy person. I appreciate the time. And you mentioned the website, so I'll be sure and link it. Would you like to tell folks how to get there or any other places where they can find you?
Sure. Yeah. Please go to the website, icecubescomic.com. and I have all the social links on there as well. There's a YouTube page where I do post videos when I get the time to make a new video. Uh, if I have the time, if I'm not too much under the gun, I'll try to set up a camera and film as I'm inking, because I think, that's kind of a neat thing to show. And I want to do more videos in the future. So watch the YouTube channel if you can. Um, and yeah, go to the store. I am selling my books still, and I'm doing commissions as well. If people who are interested, I sort of, my style is like TV cartoons and, funny
Mhm.
animals, kind of simplistic. If anybody wants a superhero drawing, I'll give it my best shot. Not sure it's going to be, what you would expect, but and then selling the books at the store. So yeah, please go to the store. The links are on the website.
All right. Well, Leroy, I appreciate the time. Did we miss anything in the talk through that you want to make sure to share before we close?
No, no, I really appreciate it. If anybody does go to the website, I used to do Kickstarters to raise money. What I've done is turned on the ads now. So I've got Google ads that come up on the website. So by all means, click on the ads. I get a penny here and a penny there. That helps.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and selling the books also helps. So and conventions. I'm going to start doing more conventions. I like the smaller conventions better. The big ones, I tend to get lost in the mix, because
Hmm.
as an
Hmm.
indie publisher, we sort of get put at the artist alley, kind of in the back of the room. And
Yeah,
people by the time they get to artist alley, they've spent hundreds of dollars buying all the other stuff. They don't really have time or, for us. So, but the small comic cons are great. I meet a lot of fans, and I really love the small cons, the local cons. I really tend to get a lot out of those.
well,
Looking forward to
fantastic.
doing more of those. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I hope to meet you in person at some point at a con, and glad to have you
Yes,
back in
sir.
this space anytime.
Thank you, Jason. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it. I hope I didn't talk too much. I kind of get carried away talking about comics. I love it so much.
You were good. It was a great conversation, and I appreciate it. And we'll be back in touch soon.
Okay, thanks a bunch. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks.